and how you can really make a difference by having a diverse organization. And so we all strive to be more equity minded, to be a better, more diverse company, because it helps others and it brings our organization strength. And so we're so proud to have you here. We're honored and grateful that you could be with us today, Rachel. And I will pass it over to you. I'll put my mask on and then pass it on over and you can take it away.
My way over.
All right.
All right. So, do you want me here? Do you want me to turn it? Okay, perfect.
Whatever's
Perfect. So, hello, everybody. My name is in a funny situation. I am Rachel Schlesinger, but I am transitioning to Rachel Cuesta. I'm in the middle of a name change and I'm having an identity crisis at the moment. So let me share my screen before we dive in. I believe it's this one. Right? And let me just make sure I can. Where? Oh, there it is. Thank you. It's so teeny tiny. I know. I'm like, this is so small. So let's see. Let me just move this so I can see my screen. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. So yes, so my name is Rachel Schlesinger. I'm transitioning to Rachel Cuesta. Like I said, I'm in the middle of a bit of an identity crisis just because the process of changing your name is quite extensive. So I'm here today to talk about accessibility and employers and what your role is as a company. I want to talk about some of the concerns and myths that you might have about hiring the disabled workforce. And so, it'll be a really great lesson for today. So a little bit about me, just some background information. Like Tanya mentioned, I teach at San Diego State University, and I teach a class called Disability and Society, which critically analyzes how society views disability and the implications of that. And so I talk really broad scope in terms of what disability means. And so when I'm talking about disability today, I am not just talking about people who use wheelchairs. I am not just talking about amputees, those physical disabilities that we are so used to thinking about when we think of disability. When I talk about disability, I am talking about mental health. I am talking about different conditions that you might have, cancer, diabetes, anything that constitutes as a disability is what I'm going to be talking about today. And so that's something that we'll be addressing.
So Rachel, do you mind if I
just
really quickly, I don't want to interrupt or anything, but I wanted to go on over here. Oh, where's the mouse?
Oh, it's a
yeah. I don't see the mouse on this.
I know.
There it is.
Either.
There it is. Okay.
It's in present mode. So
I see.
I
see. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Bear with us just a moment. We'll delete this from the recording. But okay. Oh, it's still not wanting to do it.
I know. I have it.
Yeah. Huh. Well, there's. I see. Okay. No,
Did we get it? Okay.
No.
It's in present mode.
Okay.
So here, now we got the arrow back.
Thank you. And then can we move
And-
that over to the
yeah.
side? Perfect.
Actually,
You should grab a pole.
or actually, I could just hide it. Hide. Oops.
Perfect.
Hide.
Is it good?
Hide. Did it go away? Or
No, not
hide
that one. No.
navigation. Video panel.
No, I
Okay.
think you have to grab it and pull it
Okay.
over.
Cool.
Sorry about
Sorry
this.
about
Little
that.
technical issues.
I'm always used to
It
this
won't let
stuff.
it
There's
put it all the way
always
to the top.
technology.
Okay.
Put it all the way to the bottom.
All right. Actually,
I
I
want to make
could.
sure people can see what I'm presenting.
Actually, I can
So
do.
okay.
It says hide navigation or hide video
That's
panel.
fine.
No. Okay. It'll tuck up as soon as it does. Okay, and then let's
Okay.
go back to play, which
Thank
is
you.
right there. Oops. There we go.
Yeah.
And play.
All right. Thanks everybody for
Thank you.
bearing with us. Is that the
Perfect.
right slide?
Yeah, I'll just transition in now. So yeah, so like I said, when I'm talking about disability, I'm talking very broad scope. Okay, so I also experience disability, and I say experience because I do not define myself by having a disability. I experience it. It's something that I live with, but it's not my whole lived experience. And for others, disability is a very much core component of their identity. And so you'll hear me say people with disabilities, the disabled community, and just, you interchange different language. So just keep that in mind. So first and foremost, what is accessibility? Well, what does that look like? And so when we're talking about access, when we're talking about inclusion, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on inclusion because inclusion is pretty straightforward. But when we're talking to the disability community and about the disability community, access is one of the biggest issues. And when we're talking about accessibility, especially in the workplace, this is one of the biggest barriers to disabled workforce finding employment. And this is something that needs to be addressed. And as business owners and future business owners, it's really important to understand that there is a large workforce that's often untapped. And this is a massive resource that's available to you in terms of you can hire quality people, but what is often a big concern is how do you provide access? So when I'm talking about accessibility, I mean accommodations. I'm talking about access in the form of not only just accessing a physical space, being able to, for example, come on campus, being able to access the virtual meetings, but I'm also talking about changing the way we view work, and kind of taking this box that we have about work and reframing it in a different way where we're coming up with creative solutions. I'm assuming all of you have very innovative ideas if you're all in this program, and I have full belief that you are capable of thinking outside of the box. So when we're talking about disability and access, thinking outside of the box is key because no one experiences disability the same. No one needs the same access as the same person who might have the same diagnosis or disability. And so when we're talking about access, we're really, again, access can mean a lot of different things. It can be access to information. It can be access to community. It can be access to transportation. And when we're talking from a diversity and equity standpoint, we know different demographics, different socioeconomic status may not have full access. And for a lot of people within the disability community, access, like I said, is one of the biggest barriers. So what does access have to do with employers? Well, that's a big loaded question. And this is something that I work with a lot of different companies and businesses. I've consulted and I've also worked and supported people with disabilities and helping them find jobs just because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And unfortunately, the workforce isn't that welcoming to the disability community. And so that's something I want to talk about today, because as employers, you have the capacity to hire people. And you have the capacity to make big changes in the way the workforce looks like and what your company stands for, and making sure that you're hiring quality people that have the skills, but they just might need different accommodations that look very different from others. And so we'll be talking about that this afternoon, evening. So just some facts. 26% of the US population is considered disabled. Now, I argue that this data point is very low. Think about how that data is being gathered, who's self-disclosing that they have a disability. There's a lot of fears and misconceptions that if people claim disability, that somehow something in their life will get affected or they'll lose opportunities by virtue of having disability. And those fears are warranted because there's a lot of discrimination that occurs in the workplace that has to do with disability. So I get it. And as a person with disability, I too am very cautious with how I disclose my disability by virtue of I don't want to be discriminated against because I have my skill sets. I'm very good at what I do, but depending on the culture and climate of the job I'm applying for, I might be a little bit more guarded with disclosing that information. So in general, people or persons with disabilities are less likely to be employed than those who do not have disabilities or non-disabled. The jobless rate for those with a disability is about twice as high for those without a disability. So you can see there's pretty big discrepancies. And this is not just a problem for the disability community, but this has economic implications and societal implications as well. And there's this myth that, oh, disabled people, they don't want to work. They just want to live off of Social Security. They just want to use taxpayer dollars. But that's one of the biggest myths. And a reason a lot of people don't quote unquote want to work is because they can't find a job, because they can't find employers that are willing to welcome them and accept them and accommodate for their needs. And then the biggest piece about today, like I said, is that I'm not here to inspire you to make you feel good about yourself if you're non-disabled. I'm not here to make you feel pity about the disability experience. But I hope that by today you start to see like this is a workforce that you can tap into and have reliable workers and find the benefits of what this can do for you as a company and what your company stands for. Okay. Because disabled people, they don't want your pity, they want jobs. So I'm just going to go through a couple of slides of some common employer concerns about hiring people with disabilities. And we'll talk through these a little bit briefly. I won't go into everything too deeply, but we can just, I want you all, I don't know, since we're virtual, you can just jot down how many concerns you have as a potential employer, and just think about the thoughts you've had and maybe whatever it is that you've thought about a resistance to wanting to hire the disabled workforce. Okay, so take a moment, reflect on that as we go through this, and then we can go through and see if anybody can relate. So for some of you, you might think that people with disabilities are not qualified applicants. And so this is something that is very common. The workforce in general they don't presume competence. They assume that disabled people are just either they're lazy or because of their disability, they can't work and therefore they're not going to be able to do their jobs. So that's a big thing I often hear from businesses is that, oh, well, this disability community, well, they're not qualified. Like they can't do the job. Well, I'm here to say that that's very untrue. There are many qualified applicants, but again, it comes down to access. It comes down to receptiveness of the employer to recognize it, how can we accommodate? How can we provide accommodations for this person in a way that allows them to be effective in their jobs? Okay, so that's one. Reasonable accommodations are expensive. So we'll talk a little bit more about reasonable accommodations in a minute. But reasonable accommodations, this has been a long ongoing argument from businesses throughout the country. Reasonable accommodations are just too costly, and therefore hiring the disabled workforce is just too expensive. Well, the data, fortunately, says that that's untrue. It's actually not as expensive as you would think. And there's a lot of resources that are available, even federal funding that promote benefits for hiring the disability community, supporting with helping you change your work environment. There's tax deductions. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but there are incentives. And so this idea that reasonable accommodations are expensive, that's really not the case. And oftentimes those accommodations aren't even necessary. And it can be as simple as, oh, I need an adapted schedule because I take medication in the morning. It makes me nauseous and queasy. I need to come in a little bit later because I need to make sure I'm not going to be nauseous at work. So this idea of reasonable accommodations just has been an ongoing issue. Even when the laws were getting passed, businesses are saying it's going to cost too much. There is heavy resistance, but the data does not support that. And most people with disabilities, they already know what accommodations they need. They might already have the solution. So the expectation that you have to come up with what that reasonable accommodation is, no, that's untrue. If you're considering hiring someone who has a disability, ask them first what it is they need to do their job, and most likely they will have the solution and it won't be on you. And oftentimes they're already connected with resources that will provide the cost of those heavy, very expensive accommodations. So it doesn't rely on the business owner. So just something to think about because that's a big fear. Another misconception and concern that people have is that managers can't expect the same level of performance from from employees with disabilities. This is another thing. Again, I've sat in different meetings, even diversity and equity meetings, even on campus at the universities, advocating on behalf of students. And even in that context, there's this idea that people with disabilities, oh, they're not going to work as hard. They're not going to do their job. Oh, they're going to require a lot of coddling. And the data doesn't support that. And so there, again, these are biases that we carry. These are ideas and assumptions you have about disability that I understand. The history of disability in the United States and worldwide is very poor. People with disabilities have historically been mistreated. People were institutionalized. People were segregated. We still have special education, which is an entire different entity from general education. So segregation is still occurring within the disability community. So it makes sense why these mindsets continue, because our societal structure is creating those divides. And that does a lot of harm, because from the disability community standpoint, from the disability rights standpoint, like, we expect to be included, but unfortunately society does not value us in that same light. And that makes it a lot harder to find jobs. The other assumption is that all people with disabilities require job accommodations. So this is another big misconception, and it's a big concern for businesses, because you're mindful of your money. I get it. I love money and money loves me. And when you're conducting a business, you want to make sure that you are you don't have too many expenses. And of course, you have to pay your employers. So those ideas of, oh my gosh, if I hire people with disabilities and they're going to need so much, oh my gosh, it's going to be so much, too much of an expense. That's not true. So oftentimes, for example, I have a disability. Most of the time I don't use my accommodations. I have them. I know they're available to me. I know that's my right, but I usually try to find a workplace that's already accommodating as it is and inclusive. And I would never, just because that's my value system, I would never work in a place that's not accessible to me, that doesn't work with my needs, just because I know I'm confident in my disability experience and I know what kind of workplace I need to thrive. But for other people, they might have accommodations, but they might be too scared to disclose. So how they might be effective in their job, it may also just be the climate of that the workplace and of your company culture. And so it's really important to foster this idea that disability is valued within your company, and also the fact that disability can be an asset. But I understand there is this assumption of disability. Everyone thinks the word disability is like, oh my gosh, they need help, you need to be coddled. No, that's not true. There's plenty of people that they really don't need much. They really just want to go and do their jobs. But I get it from a business standpoint. And if you didn't have or never had exposure to disability, it can be intimidating because everyone's disability experience is different. But again, these are biases that have been embedded in us since childhood. And even I'm very, disability aware, and I advocate on behalf of the disability community all the time. I'm in the disability community, but it's still, and I can be ableist myself. So I recognize that. One of the biggest things and the biggest concern is that people with disabilities are more likely to sue me. So think of that. You've probably, I'm sure at some point, people have had concerns about liability. Oh no, I'm not providing accessible places. And even for customers, and depending on the type of company you own, this might be a major, major concern. So I hope at the end of today, you'll have a better sense and some comfort that a lot of this stuff are just myths. They're not actually true. But I get it. I get from a business standpoint why there is that concern when you're dealing with legislation that has to do with discrimination. It can certainly be daunting. So we'll talk more about later. So the employment rate of non-disabled, so those without disabilities, is about 63.7% of our population. So that's pretty high. I mean, I would wish more people would have jobs, but there's a lot of factors that go into this number. Not everybody is actively, when they did this survey, not everyone was actively in the workforce. And this is like the most recent number since COVID. So there was a big portion of the population that they dipped out of the workforce because they either weren't getting paid enough or they were scared for their health. If they were immune compromised, and disabled, whatever it may be. And they could call themselves non-disabled, but be disabled, but they consider themselves non-disabled because maybe they don't see it from like a disability cultural standpoint. So again, these numbers are a bit tricky because even though 26% of the population says they have a disability, I argue that number is significantly higher. The employment rate for those who are disabled is about 19%. That's very low. And unfortunately, this number, the majority of people who are employed, they're working part-time. They're not getting benefits, or they're working, they receive Social Security, and under the Social Security parameters, you're limited to how much income you can make. And if you have a disability and you're not getting health benefits, but you receive health benefits from Social Security and all of that stuff, you don't have the ability to work full-time because your health care, and that is a much bigger risk than making more money. So it's kind of frustrating because people are forced into living in impoverished situations, and it does a huge disservice to the community because people want to work more. They don't want to have to worry about compromising their health care. And it puts people in a tricky spot. So even though there's 19% employment rate, that's really low. Think about the majority of these people are working part-time. So you can already, and on Social Security. So there's a lot of gaps here. So let's go back to reasonable accommodations. And I talk about reasonable accommodations, of course, with businesses, because that language is that's like legalese language, reasonable accommodations. What does that mean? So the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 is the Civil Rights Act, one of the biggest civil rights acts for the disability community, and it protects the disabled community on the basis of disability. And so in the legislation, it talks about employment and the right to employment and the right to work and make sure that you are not discriminated against on the basis of disability. So when the word and verbiage reasonable accommodations, I like to think of it as like creative thinking. It's how do you adapt the workplace? How do you adjust? And when we're talking about that, we mean any change to the work environment, the way things are done, that allows the person with a disability to apply for a job. So access starts from just finding a job, making sure that your job descriptions are inclusive, accessible. Then it goes into performing the job functions. It's also in the interview process. The entire pipeline of how do you find a job to getting a job should be accessible. But of course, the law doesn't say you have to be, accessible that entire pipeline. But when the pipeline is not accessible, often many people are left out and they have no opportunity to apply. So I like to think of reasonable accommodations, even though the legalese is for people that are actually hired within your company. You want to provide reasonable accommodations for everyone. Now, there's a misconception that reasonable accommodations are super expensive and that it's going to, take down the business. But like I had mentioned earlier, that's really not how it goes. And often reasonable accommodations, if they're done right and they're done well, that allows for other people within the workplace to have access. So if you create that culture of, okay, we're willing to adapt, we're willing to change this and not be so rigid, it's a happier workplace. And the fact that people are more willing to disclose that they have a disability, and you might find things that you never considered to work. There's new opportunities that present. Reasonable accommodations are not special treatment. So this does not mean that the person with the disability, they can't do this because they're disabled. they just are not going to do that job task. No, it's adapting. It's thinking outside the box. How can someone still do this job, but in a different way? And I always say businesses should not be making that decision on how that job should be done. You should be working with the person to figure out what solutions would work for them. Because if we impose, oh, well, I think you could do it this way, you're not the one with that lived experience. You want to trust that individual. And like I said, reasonable accommodations benefit everyone and overall workplace culture. So now I want to talk, we talked about those concerns. We talked about those fears. We talked about the things that business owners and companies might feel when, oh, I don't know about this disabled workforce. I don't know into that. That sounds really scary. I don't, all the things, right? So I want to talk about the benefits. And this is something that is very important. And we, again, it's not common for us to talk about the benefits, because when we think of disability, it's through that pity lens, that shame lens. There's a lot of fear if you're unfamiliar. So today I want to kind of spread some benefit and some optimism about hiring the disabled workforce. So the data thankfully supports that there is increased profitability when you hire the disabled workforce. And not only is it profitability for the company, but for also our taxpayer dollars. That's more tax dollars going into the system. And it reduces the cost of social welfare payments. So all of this stuff comes full circle. You know, we need resources in our community, but when the majority of the disabled community is not having access to jobs, and they're fearful of losing their health care, and they need those health care, it's kind of a tricky situation because people get frustrated. Well, we're putting too much money into social welfare programs. Well, my thing is, well, are you hiring disabled people so they can be taxpayers and reduce that reliability on social welfare? And also for rehabilitation costs. So I'm a rehabilitation counselor by trade, but most of the jobs I don't typically go for them because I like to do this kind of stuff. But I can work for the government and federal programs to help, find jobs for the disability community. But again, those taxpayer dollars going back into systems to help support the disability community, find jobs, but it's just this ongoing cycle that never ends. So not only are you increasing profits for your company for various reasons we'll talk about today, but also the fact that there's tax deductions for business owners. So what a lot of business owners don't know is that there's tax incentives to hiring people with disabilities. There are federal programs that offer internships to those who are registered with vocational rehabilitation services. In California, it's called the Department of Rehabilitation. So there are different programs that are working with the federal government that say if you hired a disabled person, you get a tax deduction, or you might get an intern who gets paid from the Department of Rehabilitation for a set amount of time to help transition this individual into your workplace environment. And they're finding that just that having that transition window, not only are you getting free, you're not paying for that employer for a certain amount of months, but you're also building up a qualified applicant who will be able to do that job once that window of time is over. So it's just something to keep in mind that, like, again, everyone's so worried it's going to cost more to hire a disabled person. That is not true. It actually increased your profits. And we'll talk about why else that is. Again, so I don't know how many of you are hiring employees right now, but as we know, finding and hiring and recruiting employees, especially right now, is an absolute nightmare. I hear business owners. I was just talking to my neighbor this morning. She owns a big company and she's like, I can't find workers and I'm competing with McDonald's that pays this amount and I can't afford it. So what they found with the data with hiring the disabled workforce is that people like to work, they want to work, so they stay at their jobs for longer, and that decreases your costs of having to train, hire, onboard new staff. And it's just, again, you're getting more people into your pipeline, into your business, and the reality just shows that the disabled community is a very reliable workforce, and they're happy and honored to have this job, as long as you're providing a quality work environment. again, there's misconceptions of disabled community is lazy, they're not punctual, you know, oh, this and that. But the studies have also shown that reliability and punctuality is more prevalent and consistent than those without disabilities. So the disabled workforce, again, this is again increasing your profits. When your employees are showing up to work, they're working, they're doing their job, they're providing for the company. But if you know, people are unreliable, and I've worked at jobs where people didn't show up, they didn't tell us what happened, and all that stuff happens as a business owner. I get it. But again, so you're not only finding reliable workforce, but you're finding a very consistent, loyal workforce that is overall benefits profits. Then in the big picture, when you're hiring disabled workforce, that shows that you're not only diverse, but you're inclusive. And if your disabled workforce is happy, they're going to recruit more of their friends and relatives. And, you know, the community, you know, what you're messaging out to the community when there's disabled people behind, you know, the counter, or you're interacting with in an employment setting. For me, I'm like, this is a great business. I'm more likely to refer a business that's doing that than not. Just because my value system says I want to see people of all, you know, backgrounds working in a space, and I want to see companies, especially me doing this work, I want to see companies doing this kind of work. So there's an advantage. You look better from a company standpoint, just because that's what people want. So there's also just a few, those are the main benefits I wanted to bring up, but there's also a few others. You get more diverse customers. You know, if you're hiring the disabled workforce, then your disabled workforce is going to be able to understand the needs of the disability community. They'll be able to help adapt your workplace environment to be inclusive and accessible, and make sure your customers are happy. And when customers are happy, they're more loyal and they're not complaining, right? They've shown that there's improved safety overall, just by virtue of, because disability is so focused on access and ensuring safety, it improves your safety just by virtue of there's a sense of community in the work environment. Then, of course, there's increased ability awareness, and that just increases your diversity and inclusion efforts. That just, you know, we're talking about diversity and inclusion in all aspects of our lives right now. And so having like one of the things I talk about, I do other talks on diversity and inclusion, is the problem is diversity and inclusion do not include disability. And I argue that disability is a culture, disability is a community, and there should be more awareness. Like, disability exists, we exist here in this space, we share our world, but there's this perception that we don't exist and that we're hidden, and we should be hidden. And then, of course, there's secondary benefits. If you're, you know, if you're a business that's all about the cause, and you know, you want to make sure that your employees are happy, if you have a high commitment to, you know, your employees happy, you're improving an individual's quality of life. The data supports people that are making money are happier when they have a job. It improves self-esteem and decreases mental health services, decreases the chance of homelessness. And so these are all things that we should just be mindful of. And then, of course, expanded social network as well. So, oops, excuse me, I'm click happy here. Okay, so basically what it comes down to are, what are your company values? What is it that you want to portray to your community? What is the workplace culture that you want to have? And so depending on that workplace culture, that's going to really be a reflection of whether you're keeping employees or if your employees are leaving. And so the disability workforce is one of the best workforces, and I've worked with teams that have the diversity across the board, and you bring a lot of different ideas to the table. So, you know, obviously you want to create a culture of access. And so you can do that by implementing disability inclusion statements onto your job listings, hiring disabled people and paying them fairly, developing creative solutions within the workplace that maximally benefit all employees. Learn about the resources within your community and learn about the resources that offer those tax deductions and those benefits. And remember that no one experiences disability the same way. So just because you have someone who uses a wheelchair Just because another person uses a wheelchair, they're not going to have the same experience. They might have completely different diagnoses and disabilities. So you have to be aware that each lived experience is different. And then, like I said, just partner with different agencies, the vocational rehabilitation services, so that you can get access to this workforce that is really beneficial to you as business owners. And of course, presume competence and access will naturally follow. So when we presume that the disability community is valued and worthwhile, and access slowly begins to trickle in. And as much as we want to focus on the tangible aspects of access, I don't like to focus on that, because I just like to say, all right, let's presume competence and let's make it work. And then slowly access will follow. So here's a couple of resources. So the Job Accommodation Network, askjan.org. This is a wonderful resource. And if you're unsure about a person's disability and what that means, this website has it all, literally everything. It will tell you the types of accommodations that a person might need in a workplace. So if you're a small business owner, you don't have HR, this can help facilitate the conversation. If someone has multiple sclerosis, how can I work with this person? Someone has cancer or diabetes, how can I make this job accessible? Go to that website. I use it for everything, use it for my students as well. And then if you're located in California, each state has their own vocational rehabilitation department. So California Department of Rehabilitation, it sounds like a rehab drug program, but that's not what it is. It's vocational focused, and they focus on getting the disabled workforce out into the workforce. Okay. And that's it. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Rachel Cuesta, formerly Schlesinger. I'm still existing in two worlds right now, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks, I'll be Cuesta, and we'll go from there. And then there's my email and this QR code, just, if you want to get to my LinkedIn. So thank you all so much. And if you have questions, I'm here, and we'll dive right into that. So thank you.
Question. Yeah. So would you recommend, or is there any resources to connect someone with a disability with a vocational specialist?
Yep. So is it a college student? Is it someone on campus, or is this just out in the community?
It could be both. Yeah.
Okay, on campus, if you go to Student Disability Services, and if you have a disability and you haven't used your accommodations on campus, you qualify for accommodations. So go do that. I encourage it. And then they also partner with the voc rehab services within your area. So that's a resource. But I have people, like for me now, I'm not in school. So when I need services, like when I move in the next few weeks, I'm going to be registering with the North Carolina vocational rehab department, or whatever they're called. Every state has their own name, but it's vocational rehab services. So you can just go and fill out forms, and then you'll start the process. Yeah.
So, there was one other question. I don't know if there's any others in the chat right now, but that had asked you if you could elaborate a little bit more on some of the tax benefits and other implications of hiring disabled workers.
So basically what it looks like, and I'm a bit rusty just because I haven't been focused completely on this in quite some time. So I'm going to be honest about that. But basically, if you partner with the vocational rehabilitation services locally, you go in, you say, I'm an employer, I want to try out some of these different programs.
Right.
You can go in, they're active, they're hungry, because a lot of the jobs they're networked with, it's government jobs, which government jobs, they get tax deductions if they have 15% of the workforce disabled. So that's why on those questionnaires, when you're applying for those jobs, I'm always clicking them, because I want to get into their quota of like of that 15%, and they'll be likely to look at my application. But so, we're not federal government here,
of course.
But for small businesses, the voc rehab department wants that. So you can call them up, and you can go on, like it's dor.ca.gov is the website, and they have for employers section. And I'm going to be honest, it's a bit daunting to get the process started. And as you know, with any business, there's a process.
Yeah, of course.
But the thing is, once you're in it, you'll fill out forms, of course, make sure they have all of your information that, and then from there, what they'll start doing is you'll get on their list of okay, this is people that are connected with us, and they will help. They almost act as a temp agency to some degrere.
Wow.
And they are the liaison because they have clients from all over looking for jobs, and they're helping facilitate, okay, this company has an opening. They help that employer write their resume, their cover letters.
That is so big. It's so big. It's so
Yes.
big, especially right now.
Yes.
Employers are just desperate for hiring. And this is, I mean, it's almost like you get a little secret of how you can hire like
Yes.
really qualified, dedicated people.
Yes.
With, yeah.
And
what,
you know, it's not just like, you know, you're just not getting anybody off the street. You're getting people with high educations. I
Right.
have engineering students.
Right.
A lot of my students are in the engineering department. They have disabilities. They're using Voc Rehab, and they're getting amazing jobs, and they're doing amazing projects with companies that they never would have considered.
Right.
But if you register as a business into the
I love that.
Voc Rehab system, you're going to get a really diverse selection that you may not have considered before, because as you know, putting your ad on Indeed, you're probably getting random jobs. You know, I've been on the other side of that, and I know exactly what we've been recruiting, and we're like, none of these people qualify.
And I was just going to say another benefit that when you were speaking, I was just thinking of is if you do want to work with institutes of higher education and other government institutions, you need to have a representative workforce and a policy that actually actively hires them. So that's a great point. I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
So,
and then, you know, when you're registered into that system, then, you know, when you're doing your taxes, you know, you'll get the forms to submit during tax season to say, hey, I'm enrolled. They have multiple different programs. Like I mentioned, I'm forgetting the name of it.
I just dropped a link in the chat to the IRS website.
So you can get incentives. So, and if you hire a disabled workforce, you get deductions for that. And I'm always talking about money, because if I were to talk about, oh, your feelings and you're doing good for the disabled community, that doesn't reflect.
Especially in business, they teach us not to do that, right?
Exactly. It's like, it doesn't reflect. So if we talk numbers and if we talk about increased profits, I'm all about it.
Yeah, it's win-win-win. I love this. So great. So Angela, okay. And what was that question in the chat? Okay, got it. So,
Yes.
welcome.
Hi, thanks for leading this workshop. Hey. So this is someone called me right before we started, and she applied for a job on Indeed. And one of the things they asked was, you know, a list of health conditions, and they want to know not only mental health, but also physical health conditions as to whether or not you have any of these. And, you know, I don't know how many other companies are doing this now because of the pandemic, but it seems like such a violation.
So that's a tricky situation. So it's interesting because I'm actively seeking employment right now. So I'm kind of back into the grunt of, okay, what are we doing here? And I've seen a lot of this, and you, especially as a small business, you do not want to put yourself in a position of asking specific questions, because you're just opening yourself up for a lawsuit. But you know, it also depends. So like you can put, you need to be able to lift if the job qualifies.
If it's a bona fide
yes,
occupational qualification,
you know, any, you know, you can go on Ask Jan. Is it Ask Jan? It's also ONET. Asterisk net.gov. If you're not sure what is required for a job when you're creating a job listing, you can find the requirement. So if whether it's lifting, you need to lift 25, 50 pounds, I don't know, depending on the type of job it is. You know, you just that you can create statements, and I would work with a lawyer to make sure that you have statements that are not
in violation of ADA, because that's a clear violation of ADA law, unless there's certain, like you were saying, certain categorizations that it is allowed, like government work, or if it's a bona fide occupational qualification. But if just a random company went out and did that, that's a clear violation of ADA law. And I don't know, personally, would you think that you would maybe even call like the it just left my mind, the EEOC?
I would, and like, you know, I would also ask, like, why is that relevant?
Right,
because for a lot of people, like, again, we're trying to bring the disability workforce, but when we're asking targeted questions, for me, if they're asking about my mental health, I'm gonna be like,
Why?
oh my
Yeah.
God.
Why is it?
I don't know how I'm gonna answer this
Yeah.
because I don't want to be subjected to discrimination.
Right.
And who cares if I have a mental health disability?
It's irrelevant.
It has nothing to do with them. So the wording typically that I see is, you know, do you require accommodations for interviews? Do you require accommodations for employment? And that's more so it's not a qualification of whether or not you can get hired. It cannot be a qualification to be hired. It can be more they're gathering data if they're connected with these different federal programs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
they're getting tax incentives.
Right. Yeah, they shouldn't be asking, regular
Yeah.
companies shouldn't be
Yeah.
asking that. And it sounds to me like they either are in one of those like very narrow categories that she covered, or they're violating, and I would call the EEOC to.
It's
Yeah.
the Indeed job board.
Really?
Yes.
Odd.
Well, and see, that's where I have a lot of issues with Indeed in general, because I've seen how, and it just depends on, because Indeed has a couple different funnels of how you can apply for a job. They can have it where you can fill out an application, apply for a job where the application was right there, but it never asked me that. So, but the employer though is the one facilitating a lot of that, and they're selecting the options for Indeed to present. So
Yeah.
that's a little tricky.
That's
I'd have to
fishy.
see it,
I would
but
call it.
yeah.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions from the audience? Or Kristen, did you have any other questions?
Or comments, thoughts, I don't know.
Well, thank you so much. I know we're pretty much out of time. I want to thank everyone who came today. I especially want to thank our guest, Rachel. This was a really informative workshop, and I feel like I learned a lot. And as a business owner, I didn't even think of tapping into that resource. And I mean, what a great resource to tap into. So thank you again.
Thank
everyone.
you.
And bye, everybody. We'll see you at the next workshop.
Have
You
a
can
good
watch the
weekend.
recording soon. Yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. Happy Friday the 13th. Bye, everybody. All right, perfect.